you're new to Flesh and Blood. You just come to the game, and you're sitting there thinking, what the hell hero am I going to play? There's a lot on offer. Now, obviously, the easiest choice is just go down to your local game store, get a Blitz starter pack, and play whatever decks there are available, and bash out a few games. But eventually, you're going to get bored of that deck, and you're going to be like, well, there's all these heroes in the world of Wraith. Which one do I play? I'm Steelfair, and as part of this video series, for you new players, you haven't met me yet, I'm a Flesh and Blood content creator. I've been making videos now for about 6 months or so. Depending on when you've listened to this, it could be even longer. And I'm here to help guide you through the different aspects of the heroes currently available to play in Flesh and Blood and how that looks. Now, this is just a quick intro video over each of the heroes. If you look at the rest of this playlist, there will be an individual video on each hero, kind of explaining their basic mechanics, when they've done well, why they've done well, and why you're going to enjoy playing those heroes, right? So let's just get started then. In the world of Wraith, there are many heroes from many different... that's the wrong button. From many different classes. You have Ninja, you have Brute, Guardian, Warrior, Runeblade, Wizard, Ranger, Mechanologist, Shapeshifter, Merchant, more of the same. And then you have the talented classes. Now, it's important to understand that any talented class can play all the untalented cards of that class. So your Shadow Runeblade can play all of your Runeblade cards and all of your Shadow cards. Your Runeblade, however, cannot play any Shadow Runeblade cards. Similarly, your Elemental Runeblade can play any Elemental Runeblade cards, any Runeblade cards, but not any Shadow Runeblade cards. So you have to have, if it's a card with 2 keywords on, you have to have both of those keywords on your character hero card in order to play those cards, right? But if it only has one and you match one of those, you can play it. So here we are, the heroes. The heroes are in no specific order. Some of these heroes are young heroes only and can be only used in Blitz. We will be doing both Blitz and CC videos, and both Blitz and CC will be mentioned. So each hero here is going to get a video. Firstly, we have Ira. Ira's ability is very, very simple. Let's bring her up for you here. Ira's ability is very, very simple. Your second attack gains +1 every turn. That means that when you use the default weapons for Ninja, not this one, you will attack with the first one for 1 resource, and then you can attack with the second one for 2. Ira is a great hero, very, very straightforward, blocks a lot, attacks a lot, and there's a lot really to get out of learning to play Ira, which is why Ira is the default welcome deck. And you can often get these for free at your local game store. They won't have equipment, they won't have anything fancy, but they will teach you how to play the game fairly straightforwardly. Then we have Warrior. Now, Warrior is, and Dorinthia especially, is all about attack reactions, okay? So you have your weapon, your sword, and then Warrior is all about playing these attack actions and reactions that buff your sword, right? So I attack with my sword, my opponent decides whether or not to block, and then based on how they block, I get to buff the weapon and push through damage. She's kind of a fun mind games kind of class because it doesn't really matter how much you attack with at first, because you might attack with the sword for 3, and your opponent has to then look at your full hand and be like, are they going to go again on the sword? Are they going to get +6, +9, +12, +3? What are they going to do to me, depending on how I block this? And all of their blocks are playing from that downside of I'm playing from a back foot, right? So that's kind of where Warrior is. If you like focusing on your weapon and playing from a back foot, that's the class for you. We'll get into Bolton a bit more when we get there. Then we have Katsu, also a ninja like Ira. Ninjas are all about combo. Basically, if I play one card after I played the last card, I get a better effect. And you can see the main combo lines here with some combo cards. You can have a bit of a look and pause the video and take a look at those. But basically, they say if the last attack you played was this attack gets a bonus. And Katsu lets you search for the attack. That means that he's actually quite consistent, because every time you hit with an attack, you can fetch the attack you need to play the next card of the combo, which makes it quite an interesting character to play. So if you like that feeling of chaining together punches or kicks and doing one attack and then getting rewarded for playing things in a certain sequence, then Ninja might be for you. Ira or Katsu. Ira doesn't usually focus on combo as much as Katsu does, but Katsu definitely has that search potential, which lets him be more consistent and get those abilities there. Moving on then to Guardian. I'm going to keep this video under 20 minutes so you guys can whisk through all these different things. Guardian is about crushing blows. It's about big hits. It's about swinging with your hammer for 4 or 6 every turn, setting up for a next turn, and then setting up to do these massive swings for 8 or 9 that have effects if your opponent lets too much damage through. Bravo is also about blocking and about control and slow games. So if you want to play a slow hero that comes back with big hits in return and smacks people with his giant hammer, then maybe Guardian is the hero for you. Speaking of smacking things with his giant hammer, we have Rhino. And it's important to note, before the Rhino players get annoyed with me in this video, the Rhino weapon is actually a club and not a hammer. That is relevant, but it's not that relevant. Because it's improvised. So before they get annoyed with me, because they do get annoyed when I call that a club, Rhino is kind of very similar to Bravo in the sense that you can play him quite slow and controlling. What really sets Rhino apart is the fact that he has abilities that intimidate cards from his opponent's hand. Intimidate basically means that you banish a card in their hand face down at random, and they get it back at the end of a turn. Now you can imagine, if you've been looking into Flesh and Blood, the real power of taking away a card from your opponent's block choices at random. They might have that defense reaction in hand, and you've just put it face down and they can't block with it. It makes some really interesting and hard choices for your opponent, and obviously if you set up correctly, you can intimidate away their whole hand, and then use buff cards to basically smash them in the face as much as you want. There is another side to Brute, which a lot of people find kind of appealing, which is there is a bit of dice rolling involved in Brute. There's a bit of discarding random cards, which you have to kind of make sure they're hitting the right card and they don't have a card that won't trigger the effect you want. His legendary Boots rolls a dice and gives you action points based on half the number rounded down. And there's a lot of little random effects that you can kind of control to get the maximum benefit. I mean, you can see Bonehead Barrier here if you take a look at that. So random is kind of a Brute thing. Okay? But if you like that control playstyle with a bit of random and a few big hits mixed in, Rhino could also be the hero for you if you don't feel like playing Bravo. Next up, we have Kano. Kano is about burning people. If you want to play a red deck, like from, say, a game like Magic the Gathering, where you just go shock, 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 but you don't really care how much damage they deal to you, if you want to play a combo deck that just tries to burn people with arcane damage that they have to block in a different way and not really worry about attacking you, then Kano is the deck for you. If you really like fire and just melting face, then Kano is the deck for you. Kano is also one of the very few rare heroes that can play on his opponent's turn, meaning that even if they're going to kill you, you could potentially kill them before they manage, which is kind of a power trip, and one of the reasons a lot of people like playing Kano. Viserai is the first of our Runeblades. There are 3 in the game as when I'm making this video, but of course I will be updating this series of videos to include new heroes as we go through them. Runeblade is a class that likes to split damage. It splits damage between physical and arcane. It likes to get go again and go wide, or it likes to buff its attacks. It has a lot of variety there. It likes to create things like called rune chants that allow it to play combo cards. And Runeblade is also one of the very few decks that can actually set up a one-turn kill combo deck. So if that appeals to you, Runeblade is the class for you, specifically Viserai. He's the one who can do that and likes to do that. But most of the time, these fall into kind of the mid-range aggro style of deck. And that is where you find Viserai chaining a few attacks together, adding a few different types of damage into the mix, and then doing some interesting and cool cards that make him more rune chants or more threats for next turn or a bit more setup. Runeblade is kind of like quite an interesting class because it allows you to set up a little bit. Not as much as someone like Bravo, but it also has this mid-range capability that people quite enjoy. Plus also you have the theme of just being a Dark Knight powered with a evil rune sword that you're chained to. Then we have Rangers. Rangers are all about, and this is Azalea, the first of our 2 Rangers. Rangers are all about loading arrows and shooting arrows, and those arrows having an effect on the opponent they hit. That's mainly the way it works. So if an arrow hits your opponent, you should expect the arrow to do extra damage or make their attacks cost extra or control them in some way, because the arrows are kind of impactful, right? Red in the Ledger, for example, if it hits a hero, they can only activate more than 1 action during their turn. If you like the idea of playing Ranger, you know, Azalea is up and down. She's not always in the best of places. She has recently had a boost. The other Ranger is considered stronger, which we'll get to in a minute. But, you know, if you like the idea of shooting lots of different arrows, having this gameplay mechanic that you have to do properly to reward yourself, then give Ranger a try. I will say the arrow mechanic is a bit tricky because obviously if your opponent blocks it, you only have a certain number of arrows. You can run out of arrows in your quiver, which is very thematic. But she does have a lot of effects that make her hard to play against. Which can be quite interesting and a bit of a challenge. Personally, I don't recommend Azalea for new heroes just because she, of all the heroes, her and Kano are kind of the lowest on the power scale at the moment. But, you know, they can be worth a try. They can be worth getting invested in. Ultimately, if you like her aesthetic, it's a good reason to play Azalea. I'm not sure I would recommend her as anyone's main hero just based on power level, but she may get a boost soon when this video becomes out of date. And obviously, there are compelling reasons to play her regardless. Then we move on to Mechanologist. There's only one of those so far, which is Dash. Mechanologist is your build-up control longevity style of gameplay, right? She does have options to boost cards and get go again, and obviously through all these fantastic gizmos and gadgets she's got, she can chain together attacks and get lots of boosts and things like that. But her main unique quirk, aside from just getting go again and boosting, is these items that she puts into play. Both the induction chamber and the plasma purifier, which isn't on here, they all boost her pistol, right? Which means that if you've got a few of them on the table and she starts with one of them in play, you can discard a blue, load your pistols, and then shoot people. Now, you might be thinking, okay, Finbar, but loading those pistols, you know, it only attacks for 2. It's kind of boring. Well, okay, but for 1 blue, it attacks once for 2. For another blue, it attacks again because you can give it go again. So for 1 blue, you can attack twice for 4, which means you can block with 3 cards from your hand and then attack twice for 4. If you have a plasma purifier on the table, it increases those attacks by 1, which means that pitching 2 blues can get you 2 attacks for 3. And if you have a second induction chamber, pitching 2 blues can get you 3 attacks for 3. And you're starting to see exactly what I mean when I say that Dash is kind of a control-y style of gameplay. Whereas if I block with a lot of my hand while I set up a few items, then I get those items on the table and I block with, say, 2 cards from my hand. And all the time I'm shooting for 3, 2, 3, you know, over and over again. We end up in a situation where my opponent has to push to get through my block, which means they're taking damage to get through that. And then they're taking damage from my pistol. And then late game, when they're running out of steam, all my pistols are online and I'm still shooting them for the same. So if you like the idea of setting up a board and repeatedly getting that effect and playing a very controlled game where you're doing the same strategy and playstyle over and over again and just perfecting it every time, then Dash could be for you. Next, we're going to move on to some Blitz heroes that were in Crucible of War. We're not going to spend too much time on these because these will all get their own video, but I want to focus first on just running through them quickly. Kasai is another warrior, some more attack actions, but focuses more on attacking twice with her 2 different weapons, and you have effects that boost the different weapons. She has the saber, whereas Dorinthia only has 1 sword. That's the big difference. She can also make her sword attacks cheaper, which means you can consistently attack with them. Shiana, I could write a whole essay on, but I'm not going to. She's a special type of hero called Shapeshifter. Definitely watch the video on her, but basically she can play any specialization character card, which is a card with specialization written on. You can see some here from the heroes we've already seen in her deck, as well as generics, but she doesn't have any cards of her own. You can build some really weird turns off other people's cards, and I fully recommend you guys having a look at Shiana and watching that separate video that I'll do on her in a few weeks. Benji is a special kind of ninja, as his attacks basically can't be blocked if they deal 2 or less damage, and if you hit with an attack, your next attack gets +1. So you can hit with these 2 strength cards and then basically get free attacks in because your opponent can't block. Benji is not done very well, but he is quite a fun hero. A lot of his heroes here fall into the don't actually do very well, but are kind of fun. And that's why they're Blitz-only heroes and don't have an adult version. Kavdane doesn't have any class cards. He is just a merchant. He can only play generics. And he has an effect that bleeds people for health if they've got more life than you and makes copper tokens, which hasn't really been elaborated on that much yet. Data Doll basically has 3 intellect, which makes her very rough to play. Otherwise, she plays kind of like Dash. She boosts cards. The difference is whenever she boosts an item with cost 2 or less, it gets put into play for free, which some people have tried to play with and is kind of fun. But because of the 3 intellect, she's automatically crippled and not very good, unfortunately. KO is a random hero for people who like random. Every time you attack with an attack that with 6 or more power, you roll a 6-sided dice. If you roll between 1 to 4, you halve the attack's damage and base damage, and if you roll between 5 and 6, you double the attack's base damage. So you can already see how that's working with the whole idea of Brute, where you roll these dice on these big attacks and maybe it works out. But, you know, again, those heroes are blitz heroes. They're fun to play around with. They're not super competitive, but they're not meant to be. They're meant to be fun. And some of them have got like some sick turns they've done, but, you know, they're not the reliable competitive heroes that you're going to choose. Then we move on to Monarch, which was the first set with talents. So now you're going to see all of these classes again, but with an element of cards that can't be played by the base class because they'll have the Shadow Runeblade keyword. So they can only be played by Shadow Runeblades and not by all Runeblades. The first up we have Chain. Chain was so good that he had to be banned. Not banned, sorry, he's not banned. Specifically, this card here is banned. You know, completely. Can't be played at all because it was deemed as being too cheap and turning on too many things. Chain himself is still legal and still very good at the time of recording this video. Chain has the effect which a lot of card players will find very good, which is that he basically can get go again on his attack by creating a Soul Shackle. Soul Shackle will banish a card from the top of his deck at the start of every turn, and he has a lot of cards that can be played from banish. So in Flesh and Blood, there's this concept of setting up your deck, i.e. pitching stuff you want to see late game, early on in the game, so that when it comes back around, you have these better turns. Now, Chain is the master of that, because early game, he'll pitch these attacks that he doesn't want, so that when they show up late game in his banish, when he's got 6 or 7 Soul Shackles, he'll basically have the perfect turns because he's pitched those cards in order to have these really powerful turns. So Chain, one of the reasons he was so good is this feeling of inevitability, where he would control what was coming up later in the game, and if you didn't kill him quickly enough, he would just set up these perfect turns. He still does that to an extent, slightly less powerful by the removal of this card, but still very, very good. So if you like the idea of playing a aggressive but controlled game where you go for the kill, but you also have this backup option of free card draw, of stacking your deck and getting multiple cards for free and expanding your hand, creating these powerful late game turns, then Chain could be for you. He's a very flexible hero for someone who likes mid-range aggro decks with a bit of like sort of, you know, sculpting and a lot of like, there's a lot of a high ceiling with Chain to plan out your turns and plan out your future gameplay. Right, moving on nice and fast, we're going to go to Levia. Levia is the Shadow Brute, so the Shadow version of Rhino. Her whole thing is based around banishing cards from her graveyard that have 6 or more power. If you don't banish cards from your graveyard, you will take Blood Debt. Blood Debt is 1 damage, or 1 life at the end of the turn for every card in your banished zone with Blood Debt. So as you can imagine, you're banishing cards with her abilities to get these powerful effects like Dread Screamer here, and then you're getting you're building up those cards in your Blood Debt that you then have to make sure you're doing this every turn and feed the hunger inside you, or you take damage from the fact that you haven't fed your own hunger. Levier is a very interesting hero with a lot of graveyard management and control, a lot of big attacks, and very good use of go again. She can put on a lot of damage. She doesn't have a lot of on-hit effects, which means that her damage isn't that scary aside from big numbers, but she does actually have a lot of very interesting gameplay strategies, and she can block quite well too. So while she is sort of like a mid-rangey aggro deck, you know, she has this capability of sort of blocking, playing a slower game, controlling her banished zone, controlling her graveyard. So if you like the idea of controlling multiple zones while also doing these really big hits over and over again and smashing your opponent, then Levia could be for you. Similar to people who like to play the other brute classes, there is a slot in this game for people who like just hitting people with big attacks while also controlling their own side of the board. Bolton is a light hero, a light warrior, and he focuses around this idea of putting cards into the soul. The soul is just a separate banished zone where cards go, basically, and it gives you abilities for spending cards from your soul. So if you look at Bolton's ability, you'll see he can banish a card from his soul to give a certain attack go again if it's got power greater than its base. The Bolton's abilities are all about charging the soul. You'll see he's got an ability that lets him charge. Charge just lets you put a card from your hand into the soul, and that really is all you're doing with Bolton. You're building up your soul, and you're using that soul to pay big attacks. He does have a combo deck, which people quite like, which is based around this card here, Luminor Ascension. I don't think I can get the image big enough for you guys, but basically all it does is give your weapons +1 attack. And if you reveal the top card of your deck, you can gain a life and put it into your soul if it's a light card. And obviously, with his hero ability, you can banish that card from your soul to give the weapon +1 once you've given it +1. So you actually use the sabers from Kasai to build up a turn where you're playing multiple of these Luminor Ascensions. You're attacking with like 6 weapons over and over again. and then you're gaining life when they hit. So a lot of people have liked that control style of gameplay where you're blocking a lot, building up your combo, building up your soul, and then coming in with this massive return for like 30 damage. If that sounds like your style of gameplay, I highly recommend Bolton over Viserai for that particular style of gameplay, just because he is a bit more consistent at the moment with the combo style of gameplay. Viserai is better as a mid-range aggro deck at the moment, but combo Bolton is still competing and doing very, very well. Moving then on, we've got Prism. Prism is a whole other new class called Illusionist. She also uses her soul, which she puts stuff in if her attacks hit. She uses her soul, she makes spectral shields that soak up 1 damage. She comes in with these big heralds that have this massive drawback, which is that if they're blocked by a card with 6 or more power, they get destroyed. You can use her legendary boots to stop yourself from just losing the action point when they get destroyed. You can give them go again with the weapon. On one side, Prism is this mid-rangey aggro speed down deck, similar to Brute, where she's playing these big attacks for 6 with go again, which had that drawback of they can be broken if they're blocked with the wrong card, and she has a lot of cards that let her block. On the other side of Prism, and this is something that might appeal to people, is this more slow control, permanent-based gameplay, where you're making these permanent auras and attacking with them instead of attacking with big attacks. And they all have pretty powerful effects. Is there one here? There doesn't seem to be one on this page. But basically, you'll put out an aura that says, at the start of your turn, banish a card from your hand, make a shield, and draw a card, right? If it's the right type of card. And you can build up a few of those, and those auras have the caveat that they can only be destroyed if your opponent attacks them. And also, if your opponent attacks them, the attack they attacked with gets destroyed, so they lose go again, they lose the ability to do multiple things. Now, there's drawbacks to that deck, because if you're playing against someone with a lot of go again, you don't really have the option to keep a lot of them on the table, because they'll attack you and then they'll attack the shield. But if you're playing against other classes that don't have a lot of go again, like the Brutes and the Guardians, you're going to be in a situation where they have 1 attack a turn, they have to attack the aura, and in between them attacking the aura, you're basically grinding them down with other shields and other things, and playing this kind of control-y, grindy game where you're building a board, and then the board's being reset a little, you're building more board, controlling the game through playing permanents, kind of like an enchanter kind of deck. So if that kind of appeals to you, maybe take a look at Prism. People also really like her art because it's full of angels and glory and stuff. Now we have our 3 latest heroes as of recording this video. So I'm recording this video in November, the 11th of November, and obviously I will redo this video when the new set comes out, or I may leave this one and I may add another video that has some other alternatives in it, and then just update this video every now and then, because of course there will be a playlist after this video that spends about 15-20 minutes on each specific hero and what they do, so look for that over the next few weeks. And hopefully that will allow anyone who's watched this initial video to deep dive into some ideas for their favorite hero and understand a bit more about how they play. So let's start with Lexi. Lexi is our other ranger, so our second ranger. Look at there. She flies through the sky on the Aurora Borealis of the world, which is pretty cool, and harnesses ice and lightning. So elemental heroes, it's important to understand, they can play any elemental card that's written here that matches their class. So elemental rangers or any elemental card. There are elemental cards as well. And then they have an essence. And the essence determines what other cards they can put in their deck. So this says Essence of Ice and Lightning, so you can include any ice cards or lightning cards, and the other heroes have some combination of the same. Lexi is a ranger, so just like Azalea, she's about loading bows into her arrows, but she is an ice and frost ranger, which means all of her abilities have more elemental pickers, basically, and operate kind of along different lines than Azalea. Ice cards at their basic are control cards, so they make your opponent's cards cost extra, and that's what you can see in this Frostbite token over here and Channel Lake Frigid here. So Lexi has one side of her deck which lets her basically control the opponent and create make it harder for them to pay for cards, lock them down, make them discard cards. And on the other side of things, she has lightning, and lightning is all about going again, going wide. And you can see her lightning bow gives her go again and lets her go wide. And basically, the lightning side of the deck will just be trying to play as many attacks as possible and just be super aggro, go, 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 go. There's also a combo build with Lexi and a card called Snapshot and Death Dealer. Please look up those two cards, so Snapshot and Death Dealer. The brief summary is that Snapshot lets you use Death Dealer again, and Death Dealer draws you a card. And if you play Death Dealer as an instant, because it has go again, you get an action point back. So playing Snapshot Death Dealer, You can basically snapshot, draw a card, draw another snapshot, play another snapshot, draw a card, and keep going. So it's a bit of a combo. So look at those two cards if you're interested. A look at the Lexi video where I'll break down that combo a bit more. For the moment, just know that Lexi is about firing arrows, controlling the game on one side, going again on the other one, and she has two decks. One is very, very aggressive with go again and attacks, and the other one is very control, trying to lock down your opponent and get these arrows to hit that kind of slow them down. She's quite effective at that. She does have some weaknesses, mostly based around the fact that arrows can run out, same as with Azalea, and if they do, you're in a bit of trouble. Moving on to Ultim. So Ultim is our second Bravo hero, second Guardian hero after Bravo. So like Bravo, he's about attacking, blocking. He's about blocking and then attacking back with big attacks or big threats. The difference between Bravo and Ultim is that Ultim is more focused around the ice element, which brings in these control elements to the game. So he can make these frostbite tokens like Lexi. He can control people by making their cards cost more. His basic weapon, if you pitch an ice card, makes a frostbite token if it hits, which means it's harder to block. Ultim has a bit of problems because if you're going to play Ultim, you have to play quickly because he himself is a slow deck, which means the game will go for longer turns, which means to play Ultim, you have to be comfortable playing your turns very fast. And at the moment, I would say as well, asking your opponent to play their turns fast, which is something not everyone will be comfortable with. But if you like the idea of, you know, blocking a lot, stopping a lot of damage, and coming back with these hits that present control elements and slow the game down until it's in your favor, then Ultim could be the hero for you. So he really has the ability to make the game go in his favor by, say, slowing down the game by blocking, setting up this Oak and Old, which then comes in with 9 and dominates, so it can't be blocked except with one card from hand. And then you have this massive attack coming in, and if it hits, your opponent has to put 2 random cards at the bottom of their deck, which, as you can imagine, is a massive threat for anyone to deal with. Our last hero and our third Runeblade is Briar. Now, Briar is an interesting hero to talk about because essentially she has, like all the heroes in this set, 2 decks. She has a lightning deck, which is all about go wide, aggressive attack, and having go again. And she gets go again by playing 2 non-attack action cards. And then she gets one of these embodiment of lightning tokens that gives her next attack action go again. But whenever an attack she controls hits, she actually also generates one of these embodiment of earth tokens, which increases the amount her non-attack actions block for every turn. So in Briar, you're playing a mix of attack actions and non-attack actions, which means you see lots of the different card types in the game, and you're rewarded for hitting and blocking well. So she's got a few different verticals that make her play really well, because you both have to defend and attack correctly. She has a lightning deck, which is at the moment very, very cheap, runs lots of zero-cost cards. It's kind of like your red deck wins or your really aggressive deck that just aims to say, okay, how much damage am I taking from you? I don't care. This is how much damage I'm dealing to you. You do have to block in that deck as well, but the blocks are empowered by how much you've attacked. So it is really a balance where you have to do both. It's not just doing one or the other. And, you know, she's a really fun hero for that regard because she really leans heavily on her hero ability and uses it a lot to generate openings for her, both on attack and defense, which is really good. So that's Lightning Briar. It's aggressive, go again, attacking. Earth Briar is more of a control deck where you're setting up these big, powerful attacks, and you're basically creating instances of arcane and physical damage, just like in Runeblade, but you're doing it on these big attacks for like 12 or 15 or something like that, and you're consistently using those attacks to push through lots of damage, maybe draw a card, and maybe put your opponent on the back foot and make them block. And of course, if those attacks hit, you do generate these embodiments, and you block better. So people who like that gameplay of always engaging in the game, choosing your optimal turn, and like getting advantage from both hitting and defending properly are going to find a lot of gameplay in Briar because you're rewarded for playing both axes of the game very, very well, which makes her a really interesting hero and one of my favorites. So that's kind of just a summary of where we are now. Those are all of the heroes in the game. We're not going to talk about promo heroes that aren't playable or anything like that, like the Rudy promo or things like that, because those are a joke. But those are all the heroes in the game. I think they're all fantastic and they've all got their strengths. Obviously, these heroes are blitz only and therefore, and including Ira, are blitz only and not very good. Ira is very, very good, so that's a different story entirely. Obviously, if you want to play a meta hero, you're going to have to go and watch my tier lists and my meta guides. Or you're going to have to watch my deck text and things like that to get a proper understanding of what the current best hero is. But if you're picking on theme, picking based on art is a good idea. If you're picking based on hero ability, feel, and gameplay style. Obviously, I hope this video has helped you a lot, and please watch for the other videos in this series as they come out over the next three weeks or so. I'm going to be making them, and they are going to be around for a long time. I kind of view them as a resource for like the next year or two, for people getting into the card game that you can direct your friends to if they're starting the game and saying, what should I play? With this video sitting as sort of an initial introduction to the heroes that are available to you, and a quick overview of those videos and before they come out. As always, if you've liked this video, please do like and subscribe to the channel. I am getting super close to 1,000 subscribers. It will make my day when I hit that, just as a massive milestone for me. Obviously, if you really like this video, I do have a Ko-fi page. You will find it linked in the description below. For you Americans, it's basically Patreon, but not based in America, which means I don't have to pay as much tax, which is great for me. I have several supporter tiers on there. People who follow my Ko-fi will get access to my sideboard guides, my deck list from events before anyone else does, as well as just sort of more hot takes on the meta and things that happen. It's one of those things that the more people I get on there, the more time I will invest into giving you guys great content. Once I get a few subscribers, I plan to set up a Discord where I can regularly play games with you guys, and get sort of more of a discussion going on there. So if you feel like supporting my channel, you really like what I'm doing, feel free to support in there, and we'll talk about how I can give more back to you guys in terms of showing me support so I can support you guys better. I hope you enjoyed this video, and as always, thanks for watching.